The Institute for the Study of Peak States presents the 4th International Psychoimmunology and Psychobiology Research Symposium. Early Days, Guinea Pig Number 2 and Prenatal Traumas by Wes Gietz.
So as I said, Wes was part of the original research team. He's got the name the Guinea Pig Number 2. So he's going to share with us some of his personal experience from then, but also what else he's, other knowledge that he's got around prenatal trauma. So I'll hand it over to you, Wes.
Well, good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And my rather pleasant role today is just to basically talk about some of the early days. And the play on words with early days is quite deliberate because these are the first days of existence of us as human beings. And I'm just going to start talking, and it will be as I said, the story that I have for you is about my experience as guinea pig number 2. And I'm going to tell you how that came to be, and then tell you some of the things that I discovered along the way with guidance from Grant. And I hope to be able to offer a few minutes if anyone has questions for me at the end of this, and I will be back again at the question session a little later. I met Grant in 1997. He had invited me several times, 3 times, to a course in EFT. And I declined his first 2 invitations because it just all sounded too strange to me. But after the 3rd invitation, my magic number for paying attention is 3, and I accepted his invitation and participated in a 1-day course that he offered. And I was absolutely mystified by this crazy looking technique, by how well it worked primarily and what was behind that. So I was intrigued. And then after the course was over, Grant said that he thought I might be interested in a project he had recently designed. He said he'd been talking with people who had peak experiences, and some of them lasted some time and some of them didn't. But he had the idea that ongoing peak states of awareness are available to anyone, but they're blocked by traumas that occur before we're born. And he invited me to join him in investigating his theory and finding ways to heal the injuries that occur before birth. So I thought, this sounds good. I had some spare time, and it was a new area of engagement for me, and I was fascinated by the prospect of finding something that would allow me to apply and expand the shamanic training that I had been experiencing for a number of years by that point. So the process that we developed was I would enter a deep trance or a deep meditative state, and then he would guide me to the developmental events that he was interested in, primarily conception, implantation in the wall of the womb, and then the first contraction of labor. And I would describe what I saw and felt. Part of my brain was in a very deep state, probably the delta state, and part of it was in still alpha or possibly theta. I had learned in my shamanic work that I could communicate and could move in the which is deeper, theta state. But in the delta state, all that existed for me was the non-physical realm that I was engaged with. So I would describe what I saw and felt. He recorded, sometimes took photos and made notes. And I was intrigued by the possibility not only of experiencing healing, but also experiencing stable peak states for myself. So I was ready for my job as an experimental subject and an experimental object and witness of my own development. You could say I was ready to be guinea pig number 2. And I'm going to forestall the question that comes up right about now, and that is, guinea pig number 1, first of all, is still alive. And guinea pig number one, my understanding from asking Grant about it after I'd been involved for several months was that it is a woman who was involved right early on, but then discovered that the amount of time that would be required was not what she could devote to the thing. So I became guinea pig number two. During the next several years, Grant and I got together from time to time in various locations in the US and Canada. And he would put me into or invite me to enter that state. And we would work sometimes for 10 hours a day. And I would occasionally be in an altered state for 5 or 6 days at a time. And the work was exciting because we were in territory that, as far as either of us knew, had never been explored before. It was also rewarding because we felt like we were making significant progress. We felt like trailblazers. It was exciting from that point of view, just being on a frontier. After I ended my time with Grant, and the reason that I left the work was because it basically simply became too painful for me. There were times when it was exciting, times when it was pleasant, and there were times when it was extremely painful, and I eventually had to withdraw because of that. I had reached my limit. And then it took me 20 years to understand that I had a unique story and that it deserved to be told. I needed to process for a long time. I didn't appreciate how unique it is, nor did I understand its implications for our species. The experiences enriched my life immediately, but it was actually my partner who basically commanded me to write the story in the book that is known as Born Whole. As I was writing that book, I also found deeper implications in the story. The first one was that when we heal the issues and challenges and traumas of the time before we are born, we become more complete now, regardless of where we are in life. And that seems like such an obvious statement at this point, but back in those days, it was a novel realization for me. We also, because our own healing is more complete, we also pass on less pain to our children. The second realization was that with the appropriate training, some folks need it and some are absolute naturals at it, we can accompany our children in their journey in the womb as they move through gestation and birth. And what I love about that is the feeling that we can do our own healing retroactively, and we can do it, this isn't quite good sentence structure, but we can proactively for our children. We can all be born whole. As we were looking at this work, I realized in discussions with Grant that I needed 4 specific skills in order to be able to do the work. The first skill was to move my consciousness to a different location. That was easy. I had learned to travel in spirit in my shamanic training to gather informations that I had not visited in my physical body. One of the exciting aspects of that was that in this work, the different location was my mother's womb. And that, by this time, I'd had sufficient experience in doing that idea didn't seem as strange as it might have, and almost certainly would have without the training that I had had. I would also be required to travel backward in time more than 50 years to my own conception and gestation. This too would be easy. I was familiar with temporal regression through my shamanic work and through the practice of EFT. The third skill was communicating with organisms whose consciousness was very different from mine: the egg cell, the sperm cell, and the growing embryo. Again, that was work that I had done in my shamanic training, communicating with non-human entities. And actually, it was easier because I was communicating not with a non-human entity, but with a very basic, I guess one could say, component of a human being. And in this case, it was me, and that made it even easier. The fourth requirement initially looked difficult. I had not had this one yet. Grant's intention was that I would take on the first person perspective of the egg, the sperm, or the embryo. In other words, I would attempt to perceive through the consciousness of that organism. I would try to see what it saw, feel what it felt, and respond as it responded. Or it was doing the responding, I was along for the ride. I guess I could say that. So I was not influencing its response. I would experience what it did in a fashion that was so intimate that it was also my experience. Eventually, it turned out that all of that was easy. There were 4 things about my experience in the womb that were very different from ordinary consciousness. The first one was size. Everything around me appeared normal in magnitude from the point of view of whatever organism I was taking. When I took on the viewpoint of the egg, the approaching sperm looked like tiny little hyperactive tadpoles. When I took on the point of view of the sperm, the egg looked absolutely immense. And the other sperm cells were the same size as I was. The second one was identity. I would choose between 2 points of view, the organism, egg, sperm, or embryo, and that of my adult self. When I took on the point of view of the organism, everything was a new and completely absorbing first-person experience of now. There was no sense of time in any of those other, I don't know what to call them, people, organisms. Organism sounds almost a little bit too clinical. But when I shifted from their viewpoint of view to being my adult self, I felt like an outside observer. And that allowed me to bring my adult maturity to the event as well, and made it, I think, in some respects, less painful, because I knew that I had survived the experience, even when my tiny self wasn't sure about that. And it was like I was watching a play where I could either be a member of the audience or an actor in the play. And eventually I learned to merge those 2 points of view and take them both on so that it was all just me. And it was wonderful. And I still have that within me, that capability. The second, or sorry, what I should say was the third and fourth of the aspects of being in the womb were time and space. And I was not limited by 3-dimensional space or time. I could move from any location and any moment in time or space to any other with no sense of discontinuity. It was simply an exercise of intent. And that was also where the shamanic training really came in handy and made doing that easy. In fact, I could say that in almost all of this work, I was not inhibited by any sense of I can't do that, except for that initial sense of, is it possible to take on the point of view of the organism? So I could move as I wished, and everything was in time was always now, and everything in space was here. So the critical differences, those 2 critical differences, made it possible from being myself as an adult to being the egg cell, and to shift in space from the couch that my body was lying on to the womb of my mother with no sense of displacement or incongruity. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the first event that we studied. It would be conception, because we later on went back and moved backward in time to the point where the egg came into physical existence. And that was a kind of a side trip, but it was also fascinating and took me into realms that I hadn't investigated yet, even in my shamanic work. of basically realms of non-existence and then moving into existence as the atoms and molecules of what became the egg assembled themselves in the womb of my grandmother. So just a quick sidebar on that, and then I'll get back to talking about conception. When your grandmother becomes pregnant with the person who will be your mother, in the fetus within your grandmother's body, tiny little cells are formed that will eventually become ripe eggs. That's your beginning. So what I did was trace back from there in time. And then you can imagine the progression from eggs within the fetus that is your mother within her body to then her birth and her growing up, and eventually the ripening of the egg that gets released into her womb and is fertilized by your father's sperm. So I'm going to talk about that moment of fertilization, that moment of conception. Joining at conception is wonderful and traumatic for both the sperm and the egg. If you imagine what it's like for the egg, I'm going to describe it from a first-person point of view. I, the egg, am watching the sperm approach. As I said, they look like tiny little hyperactive tadpoles, but one of them is glowing, and I know that that is the one. I don't have a sense that I've chosen that sperm, but I know that it is the one. The choice, now that I go back into that consciousness, the choice was not made by me. The sperm approaches and I welcome it into my body, I, the egg, and I am fulfilled in a way that is indescribable. I am also utterly and absolutely violated. That's the trauma for the egg. From the point of view of the sperm, there is the feeling that I am the one. And one of the questions that came into my mind much later was, does every sperm have that feeling? I have no idea. But as I approached the egg, she welcomed me in. And my understanding is that the head of the sperm bursts open at that point. But from my point of view, the first person point of view, it's like suddenly I am again fulfilled and I am simultaneously annihilated. So those were the traumatic aspects, or the positive and the traumatic aspects of that. What I did then was, after we had recorded that, I came back sometime later and used EFT to heal the traumas of that moment. And when I did that, the whole event completely changed. For me, I will acknowledge that the trauma overcame it. It outweighed the fulfillment, the wonderful aspects of it. So overall, conception for me initially was a traumatic event. Then I did the healing, and that changed completely. When I revisited the conception after that, it was like a royal wedding. It was amazing. It was like a slow motion. How would I describe it? I just need to catch up with my notes here. I described it as, it was like an exquisitely choreographed slow motion dance. And the royal wedding part, I sometimes make a bit of a joke out of that, saying it was like a royal wedding, but without the politics. So there also, after I did the healing, I felt loving support and pride and pleasure of many beings. And there was a great chorus of celebration. And then I became aware of an even grander presence. And that was the unified consciousness of the earth, Gaia. I instantly recognized her. And what was powerful for me in that moment was recognizing that Gaia, we are Gaia's children, that she is present at every conception. And that thought still gives me a little bit of goosebumps when I think about that. And I'll just read one more paragraph that I have here, and then I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions that I can respond to. I felt rapturous. There was a shared feeling of joy and accomplishment among all observing consciousnesses. They joined in the celebration of the union, the crossing of the threshold of creation. None of them felt disappointment or sadness, none of the sperm cells specifically, when it became evident that they were not to be the groom. Only delight for the one and for the success of conception. This was pure attainment of destiny. And when I came to that understanding, I just suddenly realized why sometimes I've heard that mothers are aware of the instant of conception within their own bodies. And I was kind of stunned by that realization. So I'm going to stop there and just open now to any questions. As I said, I will be back again for the session, the question session, the open question session. But for Shane, I can't tell from where I am. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do have one or two. So Evan is asking, what is the most fundamental and doable healing process that you know of?
Wow. That's like saying, which one of the Baskin-Robbins flavors is your favorite? I have been taught many shamanic energetic techniques. None of them dealt with emotional healing the way EFT does, and that is still my primary practice. I know there are others that have been developed by the Institute, and I've been through some of them, but for me, because EFT was so impressive for me, it is still the technique that I use most.
Okay,
and I would say it's the technique that I do best.
Mm-hmm. And Evan had another question as well around, is the pain caused by parasite interference or is it natural?
Evan, I don't know the answer to that question. As I said, I didn't continue working after Grant and I did the research of the prenatal trauma. And so I'm not familiar with that. I can't answer that question.
Okay, so that were the only questions we've got for now. Can't see any other. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. How do you think, how crucial do you think it is the conception for male species? In other words, how do you fully know as a male that you're actually free of trauma in that area?
I'm not sure I understand the question. There might be a nuance in there.
Yeah, I think it's specifically around, so with conception, the trauma, how do you know that you're free of conception trauma as a male? So how important is it to the male species?
I think it's extremely important. Now, if I understand the question right, the question is related to my conception and my own healing of the trauma of my own conception. I can't feel any difference between the conception for a male and the conception for a female. You know that it is the sperm that determines the gender. And yeah, when I was the sperm and the egg in those two different consciousnesses, I felt the egg to be female and I felt the sperm to be male. And when I thought, why is it feeling that way? The only conclusion that I came up with was that the sperm originates in the father and the egg originates in the mother. But I don't have any sense that the gender of the sperm has an effect there.
Sorry, yep. I think that's a good answer. There is one more question. So from Julie Bucker, she's asking, has your research ever caused you to want to give up or take a break?
My research?
Yes.
No. I mean, what I would have to say as a larger answer to that question was that after I had finished working with Grant, I continued on to do other research and eventually moved into larger areas of consciousness, eventually getting to the point where my meditations would take me into the realm of life between lives, Michael Newton's area of expertise, and other realms that go beyond that one. I've now started working with concepts like the law of one, but I've never felt discouraged in the research. It has always been new. I mentioned earlier that the ISPS research, what I was doing with Grant, eventually just became too painful to continue. And that, if you could, if that is the answer to the reason that I stopped doing that research, I started essentially putting my energies into a different realm. So that's kind of my answer to that question. I feel like I've been rambling a bit, but there you go.
So Christian had a follow-up question to the conception trauma question, which was, so is it that you don't really care about your gender? You just feel that you exist?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not gender fluid. I am very much male, masculine in my being. But yeah, I'm just me. That actually has been a factor in my doing the research and my ongoing relationship with Grant too, because sometimes people would make comments about something that they saw, and I didn't see myself as different, even though I had various peak states, and it was just, I'm just me. I don't sense being different, and it's been like that pretty much all my life. People tell me I'm different. Well, like, you're different, but I'm just, yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much, Wes. So time's up. Really appreciate it. And like you said, you're going to be back for the panel discussion later on. So I'm sure there'll be more questions that people will have for you then. So then we'll save them till then. Then there was one or two that I didn't get around to asking now. We'll save them for the panel.
Okay, I'll see you soon.
Thanks for being here. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. For more information, please visit www.peakstates.com.